across the Ravenel Bridge into Mount Pleasant. We were almost to Sullivan's Island when the Yukon turned left into a residential community. I caught the light, and it was a good minute before I made the turn. I couldn't see the Yukon and wondered if Greg had disappeared into one of the driveways that fringed both sides of the road. After about a mile, the residential area turned industrial, and I saw a sign for a 24-hour storage complex. It was one of those places where people store stuff they don't need but can't bring themselves to get rid of. Old furniture, VHS players, great-grandpa's collection of antique back scratchers, shit like that. I pulled up to the gate blocking the entrance and counted 5 rows of blue buildings, each containing about 10 storage units with white metal garage doors. Greg's Yukon was parked next to one of the doors at the far end of the center building. The complex was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I called Laura and asked if she and Greg rented a storage unit. She had no idea what I was talking about, and I hung up before she could ask any questions. When she immediately called back, I turned off the phone. I drove past the complex and parked in an abandoned lot next to a convenience store. I was about to start walking toward the fence to get a better look when a gray Audi sedan pulled up in front of the entrance. A second later, the gate started moving, and its chain clanked against the gears like a roller coaster being tugged up a hill. When the car pulled through, I took off in a sprint. 15 seconds later, I was inside the fence and the gate was closed. I put my hands on my knees and tried to catch my breath. When I looked up at the razor wire, I realized I hadn't really thought this plan through. I walked toward the side of the middle row of units and peered around the corner. The Audi was parked behind Greg's Yukon. I leaned against the building and listened for voices, but didn't catch anything more than the occasional sound of Greg's high-pitched laugh. A few minutes passed before I heard the rattle of a metal garage door, followed by 2 car doors slamming shut. I ran down the adjacent row and pressed my back against the building. When I looked around the corner, the Yukon and Audi were pulling through the gate. A moment later, they were gone. The gate began to close, and I knew there was no way to reach it in time. I was trapped, at least until someone came through the gate, which might not be until morning. I walked over to the unit where Greg had been parked. A 4-digit padlock hung from a latch on the metal door. I grabbed the lock and entered the month and year of Laura's birthday. No dice. I tried Greg's birthday, then his and Laura's anniversary, but the lock didn't budge. I tried to think of other 4-digit combinations that might be significant to Greg. When I entered 0715 and pulled down on the shackle, the lock opened with a loud click. That was the birthday of Cantrell, Greg and Laura's asshole of a Boston Terrier. I knew the date because just a few weeks earlier, I'd watched them sing happy birthday to the dog while he gobbled up a cupcake Laura had made out of garbanzo flour and Greek yogurt. I opened the storage unit door, stepped inside, and found a light switch on the wall to the right. The unit was about 15 feet square and filled with big boy toys. A jet ski, a set of golf clubs, a chromed-out Triumph Bonneville. Along the back wall sat several stacks of black Pelican cases, the kind professional photographers use to store their cameras and lenses. I pulled down one of the cases and opened it. It was packed with plastic gallon bags filled with marijuana. I stared at the bags for a long moment, wishing Greg had just been screwing around. An occasional piece of ass would have been easier to swallow than a felony-sized stash of pot. Each case I opened inched my temper closer to its red line. More bags of pot, bags of pills, rolls of cash, and a Glock 9mm handgun wrapped in a dish towel. By the time I'd opened all the cases, my veins were ready to burst. Greg was screwing around with my sister's life, and I wanted to hurt him for it. The devils on my shoulder had some ideas about how to make that happen. They also suggested pocketing a few bags of pills before making any rash decisions. I was considering my options when I heard the rattle of the entrance gate. A few seconds later,